Hello, everyone. And I have Heather on today, who is a doula from Portland, Oregon, is where we met. I just wanted to invite her in because she's been a huge support to me in my own pregnancy right now, but also even before being doulas together in Portland, Oregon. So I just had to have her on to talk all things doula work, birth work, midwifery, all of the things. So welcome, Heather.
Thanks, Allison. It's so wonderful to be here. I love you and I love your work, and I'm just excited to sit with you.
Mm. Well, so who are you? Who are you, Heather? And just give me a little intro.
All right. Who am I? I am 45, so I'm sitting at I don't know if that's midlife now. I don't know what it's considered, but sitting and I feel like that place of like really coming into my womanhood and my center and the place in my career. I've been a birth worker and passionate about birth for quite a long time. It's kind of foggy when I first got started. But attending births was, I would say, my nephew's first nephew in 2004. And then it spiraled and waved and took many paths to get to doula training. And now I'm actually a student midwife. And I moved from Portland, Oregon to just north of Sydney, Australia. And this is actually where I got did my doula training and my massage training. And let's see, I left here in 2011. I lived here for 7 years and went back to Portland and really dove deep into my doula career, and then moved back in September. And have worn many different hats.
So how did it start? Like, were you becoming a doula? What launched you into that journey?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the way I was born, and the way I came into the world in my family definitely provided me with a really strong foundation. I didn't get into birth work, like I said, until 2004, where I started to catch the bug. But my brother and sister and I were all born at home. And I was at my sister's birth and I was about 2.5. And so I have very distinct memories, foggy, distinct memories of it. My brother and I in one room together and watching, you probably don't know this film, but The Black Stallion was like a movie that I loved when I was very little and growing up, about a horse. And anyway, so my mom was in a room, and I can remember like the midwife and my dad there, and I remember just going back and forth, watching the movie, going back and forth, checking, how's everything going? How's she doing? Is she here yet? Or we didn't know it was a girl, but going back and forth. And then finally I remember her being born. And then, so just like extreme normalcy, there was no fear. It was just like I was hanging out with my brother and waiting for my sibling to come. And we have this photo, which I will have to find and show you, of my brother and I on the kitchen table with a big metal bowl with my sister's placenta in it. And we each have both ends and we're like looking at it. So I was 2.5 and he's a couple years older than me. And so I love that photo. If I can find it, I'll send it to you. So just, I think that foundation of, like I said, normalcy. I never had any fear or worries or anything around birth until I became a doula. So yeah, so that's the very beginning. And then when my nephew was born in 2004, I was invited to his birth, and my sister-in-law is incredible, and she's an acupuncturist, and she's just like a deep dive researcher. So she had me like read all the things and do all the things and talk all the things. And I showed up, and they also had a home birth, and I was just completely awestruck by the end of that experience, and just felt like this was the most profound thing I've ever witnessed in my entire life. but I wasn't thinking about being a doula yet, but it just really profoundly changed me. And I remember at the end of the birth, I'm going deep. I'm going.
Yeah, let's do that.
Remember the end of the birth, just like we were all just like passed out on the bed, so tired, and my sister-in-law, sitting in the middle with the baby, and just like this was the, all the endorphins and hormones and everything were going. And I just also remember being so amazed at that, like, how does she have so much energy after just doing this massive feat? And then my next nephew's birth came a year later, and so very different. And again, my sister had a home birth, and it's just because it's our legacy, it's just like my family's legacy, and that's what we did. So I never considered having a baby in the hospital. It wasn't at that point a choice about not doing it somewhere. It was just like, oh, this is where we have our baby. So it was where I then had my daughter. Yeah, so at my nephew's birth, when you're there with your sister, it's just a completely different experience, right? My brother that was his first baby, but just really locked in emotionally. And she had a doula. And so that's how I got introduced so that was 2005, I think. So that's how I got introduced to doulas. And then again, she was blessed to have this really incredible birth. And I was like really in there with her, and felt like I was going through it. And I remember sitting down to the doula and I thought, how on earth do you do this? Because, the doula recognized, like, wow, you might be interested in doing this. And I thought, how on earth can you do this for work? This is insane. I am fully drained. And she explained to me, well, it's really different when it's not your sister, your family member. So it planted a seed, and then I did many different things in between then and studying my going to doula school. I was living in Sydney, Australia, but I decided I wanted to be a massage therapist. And then I went deep into, like, when I studied massage, just like birth classes and birth massage and all this kind of stuff. And so I was already on that path. And then I did some other work, which actually really helped me become a doula, which was work in this house where I'm living now with my beautiful friend and her daughter, who is autistic and has another chromosomal disorder. And so the work I did with her in a home-based program, like, it was provided me like incredible training to be an incredible doula, and skills, just really going deep in skills of just sitting with another human being, in compassion and in deep love, I would say, and really like curiosity and humanity, just like sitting in with the humanness. So that was, I think, part of my doula training. And then I finally was like, in 2009, I thought, okay, now I'll do my official doula training. So that's a long-winded beginning of my journey, and there's so many more parts of it, but that just got me to being a doula. Yeah, where do you want me to go from there?
Incredible. No, I love it so much because it's always because you were one of my first mentors when I moved to Portland, Oregon. I had no idea like how big it was in Portland. I think before I moved there, I knew there was a community and things. And I started this internship that was like a 6-month of, after have been a doula, you can just do this like big crash course of things that I had never even heard of, trauma-informed care, things like this, that I was just like, oh, wow. I think this is how I can meet some people in community here in Portland, Oregon. And that was the year after the pandemic. So we're in 2021. And I remember you getting assigned to being one of my mentors, because we had to go to births and things like this in the internship. And so I just remember you telling me a lot of this back then but I didn't know all of that, of course. But I remember it just being like, wow, you feel that energy within you of just how passionate you were, and you had so much to teach me. I feel like you were really, I don't know, I just felt really deep whenever I talked to you, and I just was like, I need to be with this human more in my life as much as possible. So I love that that is your story to becoming a doula and doing all the phenomenal work that you've been doing. But I'd love to hear what have you done in Portland, Oregon that has, what's your experience there being a doula and yeah, having all the hats that you were having back then, not only a mentor for this internship, but yeah, all the things. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I left Sydney in 2011, Portland is where I had moved from, and that's where my friend base was. And um, I just started, I wasn't really sure where I was going to land back in the US. I'd left a relationship here and was very supported by friends who were like family. And so I just started networking because I had a life in Portland, but I didn't have a doula life there. And so I just started meeting really incredible people doing the work and reaching out. And I'm, like I said, I'm 45, so I had the internet when I was in high school, but like my experience is not, I did, like you said, I mentor a lot of doulas and up and coming doulas, and I'm just, the technology piece has not been my social media piece, has not been my experience. Was still kind of on that older school of just like, I'm just going to call people and meet this. So I got, like shout out to a couple people, Shantae Johnson, she's not dueling anymore, but she does, I think her organization is Mudbonegrown. She was a doula and then integrated this incredible work with farming in the Black community and all this kind of just like really amazing work. And then Jessie Remer she had at the time a doula agency. So I applied to her doula agency and it was going through some changes and I didn't actually get a spot in her. I don't even know if I got an interview at that point. It doesn't matter. But so I just was kind of making lots of connections. And then Shantae actually told me, oh, hey, they're going to be starting this program at Providence Hospital. And I learned about it and I found it, and the program no longer exists, but it was truly an incredible opportunity. I'm so blessed that I got to have this experience. But for, I think it was 7 years, they had this program. They'd spent a year designing it before I came on, and Jessie was one of the contractors. And with an interdisciplinary team, they created this program called the Pregnancy Care Package. Doulas were a big part of it, but it wasn't just that. It was basically about centering pregnancy and maternity care in a new model that involved patient navigators and doulas and midwives. And then there are also obstetricians and different people involved. But basically, it was just a different model of care. And so I got hired there. And Jessie and I were the first doulas. And so we were able to continue to design the model and then launch it. And we had meetings with nurses where not everyone was super thrilled about it. And it was really heart opening because we sat in these big room of nurses and really asked them, like, how do you feel about doulas coming in and being part of the team? What is your experience, both positive and negative, with doulas, and just really getting real? And they opened up to us. And we formed bonds very quickly. And the impact of having the doula within the maternity care team was so massive. And you could see that impact immediately. Like, we had this one nurse who was the one who stood up and she was like, I have only had bad experiences, and really, really super skeptical. Well, Jessie and I did one birth with her, and then she was basically telling everyone how incredible this model was and what it's like to work with doulas as a care team. And so I became the lead doula of that program. So continued to do structural programming and we grew the team and hired other doulas, and then they expanded to another hospital. So unfortunately, the program was pulled during the pandemic, and it shifted and changed, when it started as just a small model and then kind of became the base model of care. And then they're looking for what are the financial benefits and what are the outcomes and statistics. Like, it was it was incredible and extremely unique. And to be a part of that just like, again, completely changed my world as a doula, because all of a sudden, as a private doula, you're only seeing however many, Allison, we're prolific. But maybe a couple births a month to 5 or 6, depending on how much drive you got. Yeah. How much training you're doing. Maybe it's your training that just like gave you that sheer force. But anyway, so we were doing, I think, like supporting an average of 10 births a month. And because this model of care was we weren't being hired by privately, we were able to work with like everyone. Everyone had access to us, and it wasn't the complete traditional model, and it couldn't quite be, but it was something I would say that came alongside community doula work. They don't replace the other, but they're both quite important. So, we're working with like houseless population people to people who had like, living in the West Hills of Portland. So we're working with everyone, people who weren't speaking English and we didn't share the same language, using translators, all these kind of things. And at the same time, it was at the same time that the original doula HB 311, I want to say, I remember. Anyway, it was the original doula bill was coming out in Oregon, and so Jesse and I, Shafia Monroe, Roberta Eaglehorse, there's a few other people who are going. Oh my gosh, Raven, she's has been doing amazing work for a long time. So anyway, these change makers in Oregon and Portland in the movement, helping create and working with the legislation. And then now, we're seeing Medicare, gosh, I'm in a different country, so I'm making sure that I'm saying the right one, reimbursement for doulas. And so Portland is like such an incredible place. Like it's such a hot spot. Now I've left in September. So, with politics and everything, I'm in touch and I still mentor, but so much has been changing. But as far as being a doula, it's such an amazing place to work. And even though, the issues are still there and, advocacy is still very important. And, doulas coming in now are like, whoa, this system. Yes, absolutely. There's so much work to be done. We just are kind of scratching the surface, but also having gone through those changes, we really have done really good work and made changes. And there are like relationships that we developed, I feel like, in Portland, working with different providers. Like there's this acceptance that I experienced, I don't know what it's like, and a different kind of respect and starting to be really looked at team members. And I think that is just so critical. Doulas are this critical piece to working in the maternity care team as a solid member, so that everyone can work together, because to support whoever is having the baby and the family around them. And yeah, it's really important. And now that I'm studying to be a midwife, just kind of taking that experience and then bringing that in, that like we can really work together in support of pregnant people having babies, so that we can be whole and healthy humans. Because I think that's my thing. And I remember going to my interview for that job at Providence, and they ask you, whatever questions they ask you, but I've always really believed like that this work is social change work, and that I can feel the passion every time I talk about it. It's so exciting because it does make a difference, right? It's not, Penny Simpkins had said, it's not what happens, but how it happens. And that actually influences our family dynamic. It influences our, whoever we're coming in our neighborhood, like in our larger social communities, it just expands. So I really do feel like this is critical, to be able to be there and support, the growth of us as human beings. So, and moving away from I know I'm getting big picture, but really I feel like, especially in the time, there's so much turmoil and so much trauma and so much violence. And I do really feel like this is activism. This is like where I can do the work, where you can do the work, where other people can do the work to just like really tap into love, right?
Yeah.
Because oxytocin, like we are programmed for love. And how do we maintain that when I think a lot of us experience so much violence and trauma from the very beginning? So it's a big job.
It's a huge job, and I love listening to you because you are so passionate, because you have been in that role of changing the system, and you know it can be done. You've seen it be done. And it's like, if we can do this on this very small scale, why couldn't we make it bigger? And I really feel that within me too, I feel honored I was able to work in Portland of all places to see this dynamic of how, but of course you would go in sometimes and you would work with people who were kind of against doulas in certain hospitals where it was like really didn't want to work together. And then you would go to other hospital and you would just have the most amazing experience, and you'd bond and you'd cry together, you'd all be hugging. And yeah, I just feel like that's exactly what you're saying. It's an activism of love, sharing more of that and implementing that to change the system and grow the system, right? Grow the system and to have more alternatives and options for parents. It's like no pressure, but they're here, right? There's this other type of support we have here, and that it should be trialed everywhere in the world. So it's part of why I think it's such important work. I miss it so much, and I'm just in awe of you of continuing on to be a midwife, because you can do even more change within systems when you have that role as well. As doulas, we can only do so much, but once we have more of those credentials, I feel like we can really, really impact a lot of places. So I'm just in awe.
It's interesting because now that, I'm studying midwifery, I did my first hospital placement, and I just want to say that, like, I am really not attached to how birth happens or where it happens. If we talk again, like lots of different philosophies on that, but just because I've come from a home birth family, I do not think that that's how everyone should or where they should have their baby. I don't have your opinions get, the more and more you work in birth, it's like the more you know that, like, it's the unknown, and it's just really sitting with someone and learning who they are and helping them listen to themselves more. But I think as a I just noticed that there was a bit of a grief, even though I'm so excited to become a midwife, and I've just worked with the most amazing midwives, and this is what I want to do. It's very clear. But there's also a little bit of grief because even though, like, as a doula, in some ways I had a different kind of influence. And now that I'll be, I will be a midwife. I have a different kind of influence, but then also losing a little bit of, or just like a different way to and how to make the change. And so that's why I think also doulas and midwives and obstetricians and everyone working together is the best model of care, because there is a massive system and there is a framework that, like, if you're working in certain places, that you are responsible for certain things and you're reliable for that and you're liable for that, right? So yeah.
Oh, it's so needed. That whole model is needed everywhere in the world. And now that I've been working here in Sweden, where it's really not a thing with doulas, it's grief, too, because I'm with these parents for maybe 8 hours of my shift and like leaving them. When that we as staff members, like medical assistants and midwives, we're not enough. We don't have enough time in our shift to be with that person the whole time. It's just not a reality. You have other responsibilities on the ward, and you have to, meet with the doctors, and we have to go through all the patients, and like who's a priority. So it really matters, or like it really depends on when I get to work who I'm going to get. And I feel like it's doing them such a disservice, so many parents, to be, whereas we could be giving them the most positive experiences. And really ultimately that's my goal too, is just no matter how birth happens, where birth happens, as long as they can look back at it as a positive and empowering experience. And that's what I feel like I miss the most when I have to leave, when somebody's pushing because it's the end of my shift and I feel like that's not humane. And they're like, yeah, but you are off the clock, so you have to go. And be kind of that. But, my heart's in it, and I try not to get, like, oh, if I had been their doula. But I really think that I do what I can on my shifts, but there's a lot of grief there of, change the systems here too, because Sweden's a small country, so I feel like we can do a lot. America's a whole nother beast. Australia, I'm sure, is another, like, it's just so big. But I feel like here, start that change. Like, we could have that bigger picture in our lifetime. I believe it. It can happen.
Well, and I think that's the thing that you and I both have, is that we do have that hope and that optimism, because as a birth worker, you're working in this field and you do witness a lot of hard things. And not everyone can sit in that space, right, of being in the challenges of the experience as well. But I think that since we have that hope, like, that is the driving force, right, that I do, and you believe that things can change, even though they're slow incremental changes. But and I think, as a doula, the thing that, like, you and I now won't be doing is that, like, that time at home, right, as a midwife, I won't be seeing usually people until active labor. You weren't either in the hospital, and, like, even at a home birth, right? And so as a doula, the time that you get to spend with people in that earlier labor time, what you learn and witness, and by the time you get to active labor, already so much has happened. So again, just creating that trust and that relationship. But each role is important and needed.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. Love
You
you.
went off on her.
No, but I think this is what's needed, and out there, because it's not about replacing people. It's about just growing together and how we can work together as a society everywhere. So let's hop into your own, like, if you feel like, because we could talk about this for hours. I think we both know that.
No. Yeah.
But
have 30 episodes going.
If you feel open to it, how was it? You've been a doula maybe, I don't know how many years before you have your daughter, and that experience that you've had now as a doula and helping and supporting others, and to your own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, because of the legacy of my family, I just always knew that was going to be where, as long as I was, well, and in a place, like a medical place, physically, to be able to do that was going to be what I was going to do. I did have, and again, maybe that's another podcast, but I did have a miscarriage before my daughter. And so that was quite a profound experience that I won't talk about now. But I did through that miscarriage, I actually did get to experience labor before, I had my daughter. And that was pretty profound, honestly, to be able to realize that it was a shorter labor. It was, an early pregnancy. But afterwards, I felt like, oh my gosh, I did all the things. Like, I was in labor, because they don't actually tell you that often, that when you have a miscarriage, you're actually laboring. It seems common sense. But that was actually a really positive experience for me, even though I was, again, much grief around it. But that miscarriage birth experience was really positive. And I did also get the endorphin high just from that, even though I was very sad. So when I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 6.5, again, I wanted a home birth, and I'd been working, like, in a hospital setting for a really long time. And as a doula, you don't get to go to a lot of home births. your clientele, because often, there's financial barriers and more people are just physically having babies in hospitals. And if they've already hired midwives privately, because in the US, there isn't much of any insurance, maybe a little bit, but not for the actual birth, that we don't get to see that. So I had my own personal experience, and I'd been in the hospital for so long. I did finally get to the end of my pregnancy, and I thought, well, I've seen so many home birth transfers. Am I actually do I know too much? I think is something that came up for me. But I just sat with that and I let that be there. And I knew that even though the hospital wasn't my preferred place, I would transfer to the place that I worked. And I knew the midwives, and I knew they knew me well enough to know that I could have a curated experience because they weren't going to mess with me. No, not mess with me, but I felt safe basically if that's where I needed to go. And I knew the doctors, and I'd been into the operating room. I was very comfortable. It was a known for me. So I chose midwives that I just adored and were a right match. And I was really blessed. I don't know. What do you want to know about the experience? It was the most, again, witnessing my nephew's birth was the most profound experience of that time, but giving birth was the most profound experience. Now, when I haven't talked about it in a while, so I guess I have to sit with it and take a breath. Yeah, I tend to be in my past life, in my current life, decisions have been challenging for me. I'm a real weigher. So I am a Libra. If you're into astrology, I don't know much about it, but I always really resonated. It was always constantly weighing things. And one of the most profound things about my birth experience is I've never been so clear in my life. I didn't waffle and I didn't wave. And it's not that I knew, I was very present, but this sounds esoteric, but it was I knew what I didn't know. I knew what the next thing that I need. I knew how to call the people in. I knew how to, or I need to say, I don't know, help me. Or that was just, for me, that was unbelievable because I've never experienced that in my life, that type of clarity. I don't know. What do you want to know about it? It was I was totally, so I had a successful home birth. And I had a water birth. And I was lucky enough she was in oh, okay, we'll tell you if you can edit this. So I really wasn't, do you want me to go in the longer version or the
Wherever you want to go, I want to go.
Okay. I love this story because so knowing my daughter now, she's the opposite of me. She's so clear, and from birth has known exactly what she wanted, very grounded, very earthed. And I could feel her at the end of my pregnancy, wanting to come. And I really wasn't ready because I felt uncomfortable most of my pregnancy till about 37 weeks physically. Did not feel well. And at 37 weeks, I started to feel a lot better. And so I was I'm not ready for this baby to come. And I was doing acupuncture, but I told her, please do not give any points, to make this happen sooner than I'm ready. And I was 40 weeks and 6 days, and I'd been having cramps for a couple of weeks. And, I said, I guess I should let her come. I guess you could do some points, to encourage her to come. And so we did that. And then I went home, and then, my husband had built this, we're living in a tiny house on wheels. So I also so my husband built a sidecar for her, and he'd so sweetly varnished it with this beautiful varnish. And he's an artist, so it was creative and playful and homey and cozy. And the varnish he used, I couldn't go in it. It was my nose was so strong. I don't know how you're experiencing with your smells, but like I just couldn't go into it. So finally it was the day that was like the smell was totally gone. So this was gonna be the first night that we were gonna sleep in the sidecar. So I was doing a bunch of different things, and we had some kind of I don't know, we were working something out between us. He went to bed, and I remember like, okay, I stayed up a bit later. Um, I went to bed, and then I laid down next to him, and I said, and we were planning to co-sleep at that time. So I laid down next to him, and I put his hand on my belly, and I put my hand right next to like the side of the bed. And I said, this is where you're going to sleep. And we're ready for you, and you can come. And no joke, she went boom like that. And I went, oh, and my water broke. Like, it's, yeah.
No.
Yep. No joke.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, oh, okay. All right. Okay. I was like, is that my water? I don't know. You do the like, all the things you hear as a doula, and then you go, oh, did I just pee? So I went and I checked, and it had a very, very, very light meconium. So baby poo stain, but it wasn't worrisome. Like, it was barely there. And so, I called my midwife, and I let my doula know, but it was 1 in the morning. It was like 1 in the morning. Yeah. So then I was like, oh, you go to bed. This is probably not going to Rudy, my husband. You go to bed. I want to do some things to get ready, but like, I'm going to come back to bed, and then we'll see what happens in the morning, because, I know like your water, most people don't know this, but your water breaks. And then, it could be days before I feel anything, like at least 24 hours. So I was not prepped. So I went and I was doing some things, and then I started to feel the contractions, and I put on like my music, and I let him sleep, and I had the lighting. I had, I just had like this vibe for myself. And then they started to get stronger. And I remember at some point, like, maybe I did call my mom sitting on the toilet,
Yes.
doing all the things on our compost toilet.
So Portland.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Tiny house, baby. And actually, my midwife, I had said, like, because Rudy wanted us to maybe have the baby in the tiny house. I'm like, no, I want to have a water birth. There's no room for this tub and me moving around. They're like, you can do it. It's fine. But there was an Airbnb on our property. And so we rented the Airbnb for a month. So anyway, but like basically a couple hours later, and I'd hung a scarf from we had like a handrail, and I had hung a scarf. So I was needing to like, grab onto the scarf and have it. So it was progressing pretty quickly. And so I think maybe 2 hours later, I woke him up, and I was like, this is happening. And I think at 4 a.m. I called, I'm just really going into it now.
I love it.
You can, no. I called my doula, who was my beautiful friend Christine, who now co-owns Birthing From Within, and she's just like incredible. So again, I've had this relationship with her, and at 4, I think Rudy was like, I think we need to call Christine, and I wasn't super sure, but he was like, yes, we need to call. I needed him. I needed to lean on him. I started to moan. So I remember we walked. So then the tiny house was feeling too small. So we walked across the yard to where the Airbnb is. And I think I had 2 like howling contractions on the way. I remember looking up at the moon, and then was in the Airbnb spot and starting to use the bath. And I remember Christine and Rudy like trying to figure out how to fill the tubs, because that's a whole thing. You have a home birth, like filling the tub, the logistics of getting the tub going at the right time is a real thing. But I didn't have to worry about that. I was in the shower, but I remember like feeling ready for more a comfortable water padded place than just the little bath. And then I remember those 7 a.m. and I was like, okay, where's my midwife? All right. So I had a relatively, and she was born at 12:36 p.m. So yeah, there was this time in the tub when I remember, I mean, at the time I actually was like, in hindsight, I actually was in transition. But sorry, you did start to tell the story and then go back because it's not something you like think or live again very often. Um, But I remember, so I was in the tub and I just had such an beautiful, like, I was so lucky being a doula. I just had, like, such a beautiful team, and I had Rudy there, and then I had Christine as my midwife, and then I had my midwife, Alicia, and Nicole came at the end. She was the second midwife, but then I had the student midwife, and then at the very end, I called in my bestie midwife, Julia, who's like an incredible, oh man, she's such an amazing midwife. Um, yeah, so I called her. And so we had like quite a few people there, and you'll laugh, but I was totally playing Enya because being a child, like I was born in 1979, I was put to sleep with Enya. That's like how I got to sleep through college. Like I'd listen to Enya. It was just my safety, security. And I remember asking Reed to like turn it on, but I was in the bath and he was saying, he put it on, but it had shuffled the mix, so it wasn't in the right
It
order.
wasn't in the right order.
Really, no, it had to be the way I listened to it, the Shepherd's Moon album, and it had to be played just right in the album. Anyway, yeah, but I definitely had, so interestingly enough, for me, transition, well, I didn't know it was a transition at the time, was actually my most calm point, which, when you learn about transition, you don't get that information at all. And I definitely went through the first part of the transition. Oh, I can't remember now actually when this part happened. There was a part, so I really believe that like birth is an incredibly spiritual process, and it's an opportunity for us to do some potential really deep healing work. And I had a moment where I like faced my greatest internal fear. And it, you know, to share, I don't think I've talked much about this. But there's a lot in my family, there's, a history of sexual abuse and violence. And so I didn't know I was having a girl, but I felt like I was having a girl. So I really like hit this point in labor where I didn't want to let her come because I didn't want her to have to experience that. Now, I was experiencing this internally inside, and no one else knew what was going on. But this must have been, so maybe that was like the first part of my transition. So I really felt like I kept saying, like, it's not safe, it's not safe. And my midwife, I think, thought I was just talking about like, oh, it's not, whatever, the physical realm of the experience. No, like, this is safe, you're in the right place, all that kind of stuff. But I really had to meet myself and meet my greatest fear and make the choice to welcome her, even though I didn't know it was a girl. But I really had to say yes. And I felt, I don't know if we have those brinks of experiences where you've got to like meet your darkest part and say yes and love it. I really had to go there. And so I said yes. And again, my midwife had no idea so I moved through that part. And of course it's, that's just like the surface of the story. But I think sharing that is like, and I wasn't thinking of sharing that, but I think sharing that is like kind of a special thing because I don't know that this part of is verbalized that often. Like when we talk about fears or what we're experiencing or transformation or everything growth, I don't know that I hear that many stories on that level. So it feels nice to share that. And then things were, I remember, like really peaceful, and everyone thought that I was, oh, I know, I felt unsteady. And then I knew I needed this one. I needed my midwife, like then I needed her to be in front of me and I needed to talk out something through with her. And then she was there and everything got super calm. And everyone thought like I was earlier in labor. They thought I needed to get out of the bath. They were, that worry when people feel like, oh, maybe there's a stall here. Maybe they were thinking I'm 6 centimeters, all this kind of stuff. So I remember, like, I just felt the most at peace I've ever felt. I was like, I went through this really hard thing, and then I just felt so calm, and she was right in front of me, and I was sitting there, and I was in the tub, and I was in this, like, very meditative state. Um, and then I could see them, like, starting to get into their minds, like, "Oh, does she need to get out?" All this kinda stuff, and I didn't feel like I needed to, but I get, of course, where they're coming from. Um, and I said, like, "Oh, I really don't wanna get out, I don't wanna move." And I hadn't had any vaginal exams, because often, like, in home births especially, they're not doing them unless they're necessary or indicated. I didn't have any indications. Um, and at that point, she was like, "Oh, do you want" I think I don't know, she offered me an exam, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I don't know how the choice was made, but anyway, I ended up doing my own exam. I think she said, "Well, do you wanna check yourself?" And I was like, "Oh, I can do that." It's, big round belly, you're in a I'm a doula, I've never felt a cervix before. Um, so I remember putting my fingers in, and I could feel her head, and I could feel like I did, I've seen lots of vaginal exams before, and I felt, and I was like, "Okay, well, I have no idea what this is, but I know it's more than 3 centimeters." But otherwise than that, I don't know, but I feel her head there. And so then she came and she followed back, and I was 9 centimeters. And so I was golden, like, don't mess with it. But it really was nice to get that. I mean, I knew that I was like, I didn't need to get out, but for them, I think to know that, okay, she's good, we can leave her there. And then I started to get the urge to push, and it's really funny because in the birth world, and I was just attending a birth class, and the teacher, who's a very wise midwife, said the same thing that you hear, like, all the time, which is most people really love pushing because in early and active labor, you have to just this thing is happening to you, and you have to, like, ride it and just a surrender and all this kind of stuff. Well, guess who was the person who absolutely hated pushing?
Mhm.
It just shocked me, honestly, um, because I'd heard all this,
Mm.
rhetoric around it. I'd seen it, I'd said it, like, all this kinda stuff, and I looked at my, Julia, my friend, the midwife who was just being my friend, and then Alicia, and I was just like, "Just tell me, um, please tell me, like, help me, like, how do I"
Mm.
Not that I needed physical help, I needed mental help because I just was and now I couldn't really explain to you what it felt like because the feelings are just in your mind after you've experienced them in your body. It's like when you've hurt yourself or done something before, you can remember the memory, but you can't feel it. I just remember I really didn't like it, and or it was really challenging. No, I really didn't like it. I really was just part of my language was really like, "Fuck this. This is fucked up." This is just don't, and I love my birth, so I'm not saying that in the sense that, like, I don't think it wasn't good. It was just really it was a real whatever it was a lot for me. Um, and so I really intellectually wanted to be like, "Please just, like, tell me how people do like, I know how people do this. I've helped through this," but I don't know, they talked me through it a little bit, but then I came up with this affirmation on my own, like, it just came out of me, which was, um, "How do I love this? Show me the way."
Mm.
And that's what, like, and I didn't push for long. First baby, big baby. I didn't know how big she was till after she was born. Um, Fast pushing, for a first baby. Um, so, like, in between that was what I said to myself. I just said, "How do I love this? Show me the way." And I pushed actively, but the only thing I was really lucky with my birth story. Sometimes it is luck or genetics or whatever, situational. Um, I didn't Birth is hard, labor is hard, like, even it goes as smooth as possible, right? Because I say to my clients, I'm like, "Well, why do we expect this to be easy? You have a human being inside of you. That's, about whatever you big, and it has to get out of you. Like, how could that logically be easy? It just doesn't make sense, nor should it." Um, so that affirmation just really, it really helped me. It really like gave me such peace and understanding and like a place to lean into to like allow myself to go past my comfort zone, to just be like, life is hard, right? Life in general is hard. How do we get through those moments of just like, where can we dive deep and like love this thing that just is really hard and really uncomfortable and I really don't like and I really don't want to do, but like what is the only way to go through it is to go through it. So that's what got me through. In like I said, in hindsight, I think the only thing that I'm curious about my birth is like, what if I had just really done more like instead of because I did intentionally push her out, but if I just kind of more breathed her out because it was working, would that have been less physically intense for me? Like, would it have slowed her down? Because I could feel her moving. Anyway, so I think I pushed for 45 minutes. So I had like a relatively like pretty short labor for my active labor was pretty short for a first time mom. And my mom had short labors. So I was thinking like maybe that I have that in my history or genetics or whatever. But when she was born, I told you I had this miscarriage before. So it was pretty disconnected from her throughout the pregnancy because of that. And when I'll show you the video sometime, it's very grainy. I wish I'd had filmed, my birth. I didn't think that I wanted it, but in hindsight, but Christine got this little clip and I'm just like, she's in my arms and I am just, that deep cry where you just like that deep sob where it was just like, I honestly could not believe this had happened. I didn't believe that she was in. I kept asking, like, is this real? Is she real? Is this happening? Like, is she here? There was maybe 5 minutes that I actually wasn't sure. I mean, I knew obviously. I just, but I really, yeah, that was, and that meeting of like that grief and this, I'd wanted a baby since I was 3 years old. No joke. That's what I wanted. So to be 39 and going through that and having a home birth, and then like I was lucky enough to have, like, I didn't have a stitch. Like I had a little graze, but I didn't have a stitch. And she was big. She was 8 pounds, 13 ounces. So she was a plump little thing. But I remember I'm on the bed and we moved from the pool finally. Oh, and then this will be another story, but I ended up doing an unplanned lotus birth. I told you that. For those who don't know, a lotus birth is when you don't cut the placenta or the umbilical cord, and you let it dry and hang out. So that was not my plan. When I learned about that when I was a doula in 2009 or whatever, I thought it was super weird. And to be totally honest with you, I was just like, that's odd. Why would you? And I couldn't do it. The midwives are, getting out. Do you want to cut the umbilical cord? No, I'm not ready, in the bath. Okay, or in the bed, do you want to cut it? No, I'm ready. And then, okay, we're going to go. Do you want I said, oh, well, what if you go back to my, so we had to sort of makeshift, or Rudy did makeshift, and prepare for that. But yeah, anyway, so yeah. And I was just like, so hi, I have this friend, Julie. She was a midwife for point in when, oh, sorry, my phone just dropped. In New Hampshire, Carol Leonard. She apprenticed with Carol Leonard, who is a well-known. She did in New Hampshire, done a lot of incredible work in midwifery. And anyway, Julie, I've known her since she was 8, and I remember her telling me about her births, and she was like, I was high as a kite. Like I've never been that high in my life, right? And it was the same. It wasn't like, I don't know. high like drugs, but it was like you're truly, I was just truly in this altered state of consciousness, and it lasted about a week. And then you have like and then I had the 6 weeks, postpartum. I chose to stay home for, not leave my house for 40 days and have that experience. But I was really just like so blissed out on those hormones. It was really amazing. And then I remember my midwives came back the next day and we're just like gushing over how awesome it was. Oh my gosh, having attended a lot of births, like how lucky was I? And like how amazing, and like how this all came together. And so yeah, that was a version of and I didn't write it down. And someone told me, like, you need to write this down within the first week. And I didn't. And it's not that I regret it. It would be interesting to read it, but it's still like, it's so true that, I've supported a lot of different people through this experience with every kind of outcome, positive, traumatic, challenging, all the kind of things, all the different stories. And I still think it's like the most awesome thing we can do, and the potential for, our growth and expansion. And, we might, I did the orgasmic birth practitioner course with Deborah Pascali Bonaro, and, her definition, when I first learned about orgasmic birth, I really was like, what? I really thought it was like the thing about an orgasm. And, later when I studied with her, I realized, oh, like, no, she's talking about finding empowered experiences within the birth process, because we're really just like this story of fear. So, I just think it's the most incredible thing. And yeah, I'm in awe of myself. I'm in awe of like every person who does it. I wish that we lived in a world in which that people could like experience the love and the support in a way that really should be our human right, no matter where we choose to have our babies. And I was just really, yeah, it was just gushing. I would say that had an orgasmic birth experience. I did not have an orgasm in labor, but it was truly one of the most powerful, profound things that I've done in my life. So.
Oh, Heather, oh, it's so incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, it's just such a beautiful, I mean, I knew little bits of that, but I didn't know. And being pregnant now, I'm just like, I love hearing these stories of, just like you were saying, like the expansion and the growth. And there's going to be a lot of parts in labor that I'm probably not going to love. And that's okay. And just finding that affirmation yourself, how that just came to you, and just the power behind birth of just, there's so much we don't know, it's like, I feel like I learned something new every birth I supported. And every time I talk to a doula, every time I hear a story, I'm just like, birth is the most profound thing that we do in our lives. And I truly feel that way as well, of like, that we get to do this, like really, that I'm going to get to do this. Really, it's like, I'm going to be in that shock probably too. Like, is this real? Is really my baby? Did I really do that? And I hope I get to experience a lot of those feelings, because I've been listening to the orgasmic birth too, because it is like you're saying, like so many people have it, and it has nothing to do with having an orgasm, but having a pleasure, finding pleasure during, and how that really can be supported with the team that you have around you too, of like how crucial that is, of like, is there someone there to support those moments as well, and the times fear comes up as well. So it just moves me so much. And thanks so much
for asking. Am I going to do this? Like, am I going to tell this? But yeah, I mean, I just think that, I think that we've been told historically like that, that we're small, that we're not capable, that we're, that we need to be in fear of men or the patriarchy or all this kind of stuff. Like, we're so incredibly innately powerful. Like, the nature of who we are and our capacity. It goes beyond logic. It goes beyond, explanation, science, all. Yeah, of course, like this is a physiological experience, but then it's so multi-layered. I can understand why, even though I just think it's so disturbing, like why there was so much energy to really squash us down. And I think we've really bought the, like, whenever we've swallowed the pill, like we don't know how powerful we are. And I guess my hope is that, and it's not that you have to have, like I said, a certain type of experience. You can experience that profoundness with all different, kinds of outcomes. But, this world in which with like traumatic birth, right? There's just been this big study here that's come out a couple of years ago, or I don't know the exact year right now, but about birth trauma. And, there's so many people choosing cesarean births because of fear, or making different choices because of fear. Now, like, I will be very clear that I think cesarean births are wonderful when medically indicated. And sometimes that medical reason is for mental health. So and I've worked with people that was really the right choice for them. But I think that what we're seeing is like a consequence of us just being completely undermined. And the truth is that we are incredible beings of transformation and power and creativity, and that we are big and we make a lot of noise. And that can be scary from the outside, but like that's where we meet ourselves, and that's what we want. We want women stepping into themselves and, birthing people. I really believe in like inclusion of everyone. But yeah, this is our potential, and I don't want to disregard people who have a lot of people experience a lot of trauma. And so that's why we're doing this work, because yes, fear is a part of it, a normal part of it, but trauma really should not be. And a lot of the information is that the trauma is inadvertently being caused by care providers. And so I think as I'm moving into becoming a care provider role, becoming very aware of that dynamic, and I think that we all need to be when we're working in the different roles.
Mm. Yeah. I love it so much. I love it so much. Oh, you're just incredible. And I'm just grateful that you took this time with me to share all of these stories, and just the doula work and changing shifts and roles in life, and how you've expanded. It's so eye-opening, and you're still a huge mentor for me and for so many others. And I feel like, yeah, I just feel very, very privileged that I even get to have you in my life, because I really feel like so much of you and we have so much in common, but also we look at this so differently. And I love that so much. And it just gets me going. It just like, oh, I hate that we're so far apart right now, but I'm also so happy that you're one of the few people that I've really kept in touch with on a weekly basis, and going through this pregnancy, and just having you in my corner to be like, hey, about this, I am eternally grateful for you so much. Just, love you.
Well, right back at you. And it's so different when you're going through it yourself, and you get to, like you said, experience it, because it doesn't matter how many people you've been in the background for. When you go through it yourself, you've got to go through it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we all do. So thanks for having the chat, and we could talk for hours.
Yes, hours and hours, but I'm going to let you get to bed. And just, you're so clever, and just your words just are so impactful to me. And I love you so much. And thank you.
I love you.
Time.
I love you. Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing, I think I will share one more thing, which is because I think like the longer that I do this, and the longer that I know people who are doing this who I respect and we're working in the field, is that it's you get to know that you don't know. Like most of the time you actually don't know. It's really being a good listener. And you know, and that's what I'm doing when we're talking. Or by the way, I had a dream about you the other and your
No.
baby. Yeah. But yeah, it's really just like is really sitting there and being with someone and helping them navigate, because yes, like there is medical advice and knowledge and passing down of that information and safety and all this kind of thing. It's very important. That's a small percentage of it. And I really believe like there isn't a right way. The right way is for us, like if I were your doula or midwife, right? Like it's for me to help you become more yourself and listen to yourself and then offer guidance and support. But I don't know what's right for you. I might think I do, but that's not actually the truth. So yeah, I think that's really important, because as doulas, when we're coming in, you know, I don't know, I'm only learning midwifery, so I'll just speaking to that, is like there's this real idea that we're supposed to become a master of something. And I think like, right, the wisest people know that they don't know. So yeah, that's
Oh,
what I'll leave us with.
oh, I love you. I love your spirit. I love your words. I just like, again, I could talk to you forever. And it's why I'm going to definitely have you on several more times to talk about all this stuff, because it's needed. Just more education, love, just all these things. We just need to spread more of it and that expansion and growth. And I'm just so honored I get to do it with you. So thank you again so much,
Right.
Heather.
Okay. I'm gonna go to sleep. Okay.